السيد الوزير الأول، السيدات والسادة معالي الوزراء، سعادة السفراء، أعضاء الوفود من شركات ناشئة وخبراء، أسرة الإعلام، أهلا وسهلا بكم.
Good morning, Your Excellency, Mr. the Prime Minister, Excellencies, the government ministers present with us this morning, members of the diplomatic corps, experts in high-tech and the startup industry. Welcome to the African Startup Conference.
نرحب بكم في الجزائر بمناسبة انطلاق فعاليات المؤتمر الإفريقي للمؤسسات الناشئة. هذا الحدث الذي يراد منه أن يكون ملتقى لكل الفعاليات الحية في قارتنا الإفريقية وموعدا لفتح آفاق للتعاون المشترك في مجال الشركات الناشئة والابتكار.
Yes, Jonas, this first of its kind African Startup Conference couldn't have come at a better timing. One where our continental collective effort to boost the startup and high-tech industry, which is witnessing an upward spiral, one of growth and development. Jonas, indeed, today's conference comes to consolidate and unite Africa's efforts to unleash the potential of its youth, a youth that is hungry, a youth that is eager to embark on the world of high-tech entrepreneurship, which is a sector, Jonas, that is, if I might say so, the fastest growing economic sectors, not only in Africa, but in the world.
Indeed. عندما نقول إفريقيا نقول العراقة والأصالة ونقصد أيضا المستقبل وكل الأشياء المبتكرة والإبداع. ندعوكم لمشاهدة هذا الفيديو.
Algeria is my country.
تاريخية الكفاح والتحرر من براءة. مصيرنا كان دائما مشتركا وكان نجاحنا يأخذ أشكالا نؤمن بنفس الأفكار ولم تكن تحركنا نفس الثقافة، لكن الفطرة الإفريقية جعلت منا أحد أكثر الشعوب تأثيرا في تاريخ الإنسانية، من ماسيدس الذي قال يوما ما أن إفريقيا للأفارقة، إلى نيلسون مانديلا الذي كان منارة مشعة بالقيم الإنسانية، وكوامي نيكروما الذي آمن بالوحدة الإفريقية، ومن منا ينكر فضل جوليوس نيري في رفع راية السلم، وباتريس لومومبا في إشاعة روح التحرر، وعمر المختار في كونه مصدر إلهام للشعوب المقهورة، وسانكارا الذي خاض معركة في سبيل كرامة شعبه. إن العالم الذي نعيش فيه اليوم يفتقد لمثال الملكة أمينة صانعة مجد إفريقيا وقائدة جيوش الهوسة، وللأمير عبد القادر الجزائري صاحب الملاحي الخالدة في سجلات التاريخ. نعم، إفريقيا ليست فقط مهدا للإنسانية، لكن مصدرا للإلهام ومنبتا للقيم الحضارية. فكتابة التاريخ لم تتوقف مع آخر العظماء، والثورات ليست صفحة من كتاب نقرأه ونضعه في رفوف المكتبة، بل تنتظرنا رهانات جديدة وتحديات.
In my speech by thanking the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, for his patronage of the African Startup Conference, his endless support for initiatives that promote knowledge economy and startups, and his firm belief in the inevitability of investing in human capital to achieve the desired economic need. Thank you, Mr. President. My thanks also extend to Mr. Prime Minister for his presence with us today. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. I also want to thank everyone who contributed in making this conference a reality, from the executives of my ministry, the Ministry of Knowledge Economy, Startups and Micro Enterprises, to the general actors of the ecosystem of startups in Africa, in addition to the members of the African Diplomatic Corps represented in Algeria, and the executives of the Algerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs for their unwavering support in the preparation for this conference, first of its kind in Africa. Of course, I would also like to extend my sincere greetings to the honorable ministers from the borderline African countries participating in this conference, which I hope will lay the first building block for Pan-African cooperation in the startup sector. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, honorable guests, today Africa is witnessing the fastest growth in the digital sector in the world, with a young and increasingly well-trained population. These talents are now the true engine of development of the emerging economies of our continent. We meet today in Algeria with great determination in order to address all the obstacles facing the ecosystem of startup in our continent, and this common space that brings us together on learning experiences with regard to public policy supporting startups. It will also be a good opportunity to revitalize the African financial field in response to the growing financial needs of African startups, as well as integrating them into the joint effort aimed at reducing the technological dependence from which our continent suffers. Mr. Prime Minister, honorable guests, excellencies, one of the icons of our continent, inspiring leader Nelson Mandela, once said, "Our human compassion binds us. We are facing a historic opportunity to advance together in areas that some consider exclusive to other regions of the world. Our next revolution will be technological. Africa is the cradle of humanity. It will certainly be, by the will of all of us, African, its future." Once again, welcome to Algeria and thanks for listening.
شكرا سيد الوزير. خطبتنا القادمة ستكون إذن تكنولوجيا.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Minister, for this speech, which has set the tone for the contents of this conference. Well, without further ado, please welcome to the stage Mr. Jonathan Ortmans, the President of the Global Entrepreneurship Network. Under your applause.
Bonjour tout le monde. Il faut que je parle en anglais today. I'm told that this is now a country of so many languages, and I always like to acknowledge the uniqueness of every culture that I have the opportunity to visit. But first of all, let me thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, and all the distinguished ministers and your excellencies and guests for allowing me to take a few minutes with you today. It's great to be your guest here today. I want to begin by saying, as probably one of the only people in the room who does not live in Africa, I want you to know that I have a love affair of Africa. My mother was born in Tanga. She was raised as an orphan, actually by Black Africans. My life has been very influenced by Africa. I have visited most of your countries. Over my first visit to Algeria was in 2010. And since then, we have brought, with President Obama, 2 global entrepreneurship summits to the continent. We've also brought at GEN, our Global Entrepreneurship Congress, to Johannesburg. We've opened a 10,000 square meter campus 5 years ago in Johannesburg, and we're now doing the same in Cairo soon. So we have a great passion for this continent, and the reason we have this passion is that we have great respect for being made to feel welcome here. We are indeed your guests, but we are passionate evangelists for entrepreneurship. And where there is a warm welcome for entrepreneurship, you will have our hearts and our minds, and where we can, our resources. I would like to especially recognize Fatia, and if I could, all the team from GEN Algeria, if you could stand up. We have been quietly working over a number of years behind the scenes, sowing the seeds for what can happen during this incredibly exciting time. We have, for example, I don't know whether you have any Olympians in the room. Are there any Olympians in the room? Stand up if we have some. I've met several of them outside. They're probably out, but there are literally hundreds of young people, many of which came up to me today that talked about the inspiration of what it means to be exposed to a global entrepreneurial ecosystem, to meet people who can help understand how you can develop your dream and make it into a reality. We're also very proud that here in Algeria, I want you to know, Mr. Prime Minister, last November, we had nearly 4,000 events across the country with the support of people like A-Venture, your Ministry of Industry and others, that really has helped to sow the seeds in places which you would not expect entrepreneurship to occur. Because economies suffer when you leave anyone out. And so part of our mission with entrepreneurship is to make it welcoming to people of all the parts of our country. But I'm today here to talk a little bit about what's happening on the global stage. And I have a couple of pieces of data that I want to be able to share with you behind me. First of all, let me give you a little bit of a sense of what's happening around the world. First of all, this year's data tells us at Jen that since the pandemic began, we've seen rates of new firm formation increase dramatically across the globe. And with the number of ecosystems generating more than $4 billion in what we call total new startup value, that means in 4 years around the world, it's doubled. And most excitingly, 91 of those ecosystems have created at least one unicorn. With the top 100 emerging ecosystems, the field is leveling. When we created Gen Global 15 years ago, we began with this notion that we wanted to tell everybody that Silicon Valley did not have a monopoly on grow your own development, and that you could have new value creation occurring all the time for your economy based on the fact that almost all net new jobs come from firms less than 5 years old. And so when we see more and more and more unicorns occurring, when we see more increased value across these ecosystems, it's incredibly exciting because 3 of those unicorns came from Africa. So what are we seeing in the ecosystems that are being successful? So first of all, I'll tell you this. Well, first of all, they have no blueprint. This is very difficult for governments to realize.